is why I want to do this. I don't necessarily know why you want to do this, but hopefully I'll be at least remotely entertaining or at least thought-provoking for you. I'm a revolutionary art propelled history forward, and so I'm going to talk at you for probably 3 or 4 minutes before showing any images, but I won't mostly be giving a sermon that we'll get some pictures in a bit. But when I say I make revolutionary art propelled history forward, part of the thing is that most artists are thought of as, at least up until about 20 years ago, people who made paintings or photography or film or whatever. I work in a lot of different media. And so I'm going to show you some photography, some installation, some performance, some video. But the thing that kind of coheres it all together is a deep engagement with trying to get people to question sort of some of the cohering norms of America and sort of society more broadly, and often to imagine how the world could be radically different and far better. So before sort of jumping into a little bit more, I've got some questions for you. I say I make revolutionary art about this move forward, and I want to illuminate this era. But what is this era? So they're kind of yes or no questions, just raise your hand kind of questions. So the first question is, do you guys have hope for the future? Yes. You think there's a little bit of hope for that? Maybe some hope? Okay. Okay, well, next question. Do you think that the U.S. government tortures people?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they do. Torture, good, all right. Do you think that basic rights in this country are being eroded? Yes. Snowden come to mind at all and other things? Do you think that having 1 in 9 young black men in prison is acceptable? Do you think that a society where 1 in 4 women are going to be battered is a model society to uphold? Do you think that the government lies to you? Yes. Do you think that torture and unjust wars are more acceptable if they're carried out by the first black president?
No.
Do you think that American lives are more valuable than lives of people in other parts of the world? Do you think that the government values your life? Yes, no, definitely. Like, that's a crazy question. What kind of person even asked that question? The government value your life? No? Okay. So the first question I asked was, do you have hope for the future? And there was not an enthusiastic yes, but there was a general kind of like, yeah, future's looking okay. We're in college, we're in school, we're going to get some education, we're going to go out and do cool things in the world. But then the answers to these other questions were, it's kind of, the future's not looking so good. And so I have huge hope for the future, but it's actually based on deeply engaging with some of these contradictions and a deep faith that humanity can actually do a lot better than this. That this is a world where a tiny handful of people throughout the world, a tiny handful of people, controls the great wealth and knowledge that humanity as a whole has created. But it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to live like this. People can make a radically different and far better, a completely different world. A world without classes, where it's not divided into rich and poor, big exploiters and small, sort of ordinary people, big nations that lord it over other nations, or a world where women are not even safe in their own homes. That world doesn't have to exist that way, but it does. But in order to get to the world that I envision, a world without classes, we need revolution. And so my work is about helping to bring that world into being. And so some of the work that you'll see is a little provocative, but these are the kind of conversations that we need. And so with that, I guess I'm just going to jump into some of the work, and we'll talk about it. Let's see. Okay. This is a work that I made in 1988. It's called What's the Proper Way to Display the U.S. Flag? It was on display once before it became notorious. The second time it was on display at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, or as a student at the time, as an undergrad student, and it became the center of national controversy over this work. Lights on, fine with me, I'm cool. So this is an installation for audience participation. At the top, there's a photo montage. I'll show you a detail of this. And below that are books that are on a shelf. People could write responses to the question, what's the proper way to display a U.S. flag? And below that is a 3x5 foot flag that people have the option of standing on if they wanted to, as they engage with the work. So this is the photo montage that's at the top. It just has text that says, what's the proper way to display a U.S. flag? Below that are South Korean students burning their handmade version of an American flag, and they hold a sign that says, sort of, Yankee go home, son of a bitch. And then there's flag red coffins coming back to Vietnam. And so when this work was shown, there is considerable evidence. This is the Art Institute of Chicago. I went to the school of the Art Institute of Chicago. So the school was attached both physically and sort of in other ways to the museum. And this was a demonstration of 2,500, almost all white, mostly Korean War and World War II veterans. And they chanted things like, the flag and the artist, hang them both high, bringing back images of lynching. This is one of the demonstrations where they say, the proper way to show respect to an art student, which was like this. And they said, go try it there, chum. Which presumably, if I did this in some other country, there might be 2,500 reactionary veterans threatening my life. They didn't really have a great sense of irony or anything with what they were doing. Because they thought, well, we have freedom, and so, you know, people won't threaten your life. Or, wait, they were threatening my life. So it got to the point where President Bush the first, George Herbert Walker Bush, the father of the previous Bush, called my work disgraceful. And this was, you know, as I said, I was a 24-year-old art student. And suddenly the President of the United States not only knew who I was, but he didn't like what I was doing. And I thought, man, this is great. This is a great job. I want to do this for the rest of my life. And so, you know, because the thing is, I think art can change the world. And I thought that back then. But if somebody really pressed me, I would have said, well, it can change the world if you're like a filmmaker, or if you're a musician, if you're, you know, Steven Spielberg, or if you're Chuck D. You'll reach thousands or millions of people. I make visual art that's seen in a gallery of about 100 people. So how is that actually going to change the world? Well, but then suddenly there were people that were standing in line for up to an hour to see this artwork. People that were calling in for housing projects, radio shows that I was on, giving me not only political feedback, but also art criticism about how the work engaged with them. And the President of the United States was actually, his whole policies and what the U.S. government was trying to implement from the Making Patriotism compulsory was threatened by this one article. So there's this huge debate across society. When laws were passed, presidents were speaking. It got to the point where Senate votes to ban display on the floor or ground. Ban flag display on the floor or ground. So the Senate on Thursday voted 97-0 to outlaw displaying the flag of the United States on the floor or ground, and announced a flag exhibit on the floor of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I don't know much about art, but I know desecration when I see it. Said the Majority Leader Robert J. Dole. And so this is, you know, I mean, here is an artwork, a simple art by an art student, previously an unknown art student, who some of the most powerful people in the most powerful country in the world were not only taking time out of their busy schedule, but they were actually feeling that it undermined some of the cohesion of which they were trying to forge around a sort of a mindless patriotism, America right or wrong, unquestionably be able to go wherever it wanted and have support of the populace. And so when this work was on display, all sorts of people, as I said, interacted with and engaged with the art and wrote their views of what the proper way to display U.S. flag were. And some of them were kind enough to say, well, you know, this is a disgrace. What do you expect from a nigger like Dred Scott? See you in hell. Or you should be shot and made to pay for and your family made to pay for the bullets. As a Navy SEAL, I personally would never defend your stupid ass. But other people wrote things like, wow, I'm a German girl, and if we carried on about our flag the way you all do, we'd be called Nazis again, and that would be right. And somebody else wrote, well, the police killed my brother, and then they walked over to kick over the body to make sure that the nigger was dead. Thank you for the opportunity to stand on this flag, Dred Scott. And so there were a range of opinions. This was not just an artwork about what I thought about the U.S. flag, even though my viewpoint was clearly there. You know, they put the flag down as an opportunity for people. If they thought that this was the best country in the world, then everybody should have reverence for the flag. But at the same time, it really was a question. It was, what's the proper way to display a U.S. flag? And all sorts of people across all parts of society were vigorously debating. And so when this law got passed, which there's a lot of complex history that I'm sort of leaving out in terms of flag legislation, it made both my artwork illegal. That they actually went to this length to actually include good wording in this legislation, which was about much more than my offer. But it did help other people. So I and other people burned flags on steps of the Capitol to defy the law. The second, well, basically, 2 days after the law went into effect. The second it went into effect, people all over the country, thousands of people burned flags. Nobody was arrested. And so I and 3 other people, a revolutionary artist, a Vietnam veteran, and a defendant from a previous flag burning case, went to the steps of the Capitol and hiding and we burned flags on the Capitol. We were arrested and became a Supreme Court case. And so this is United States of America versus Sean Eichmann et al. I'm part of et al. And because of that case, there was a second landmark free speech ruling about use of the American flag. So you guys can do whatever you want with flags. You can carve about it, you can hang it on your wall, you can wipe your boat with it, you can use it as a floor mat, you can use it right off your barbecue grill, whatever you want. But it is because we defied the law and they were forced to kind of back out. They didn't take up the case to the Supreme Court because they wanted to back down. They wanted to enshrine the fact that patriotism was compulsory and we had to, the only permissible use of the flag is to show respect for it, but they were forced to back down and now you can do whatever you want. So, this is not my artwork, but I'm showing you this to show you some of my artwork. This is a picture from a part of China in 1968, 67. And there's all this writing all over. These are what are called big character posters. And during the revolution in China, but particularly during the Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976, there was all sorts of debate in society over the best way to take society forward. And this was led by the leader of the Communist Party, Mao Zedong, who said, look, there are people in the Communist Party who are trying to make China into a capitalist society. And we need all sorts of people to have vigorous debate throughout all of society about the direction of forward, and particularly to drive the people in the party that are the top leaders that are trying to make capitalism the main form of the economy. We need those people out of power, so that the equivalent of the senators, the governors, whatever, their leaders need to be criticized, and people need to come to understand, is it just like individual bad people? Is it just greed? What is going on? So people would write something like, hey, look, I work really hard. The guy next to me is really lazy. He doesn't work hard at all. And we get paid the same. This is messed up. What we need to do is have different pay, and the government should pay us differently because then we would have an incentive to work hard. And then instead of somebody tearing that down, somebody would say, well, actually, let me write next to it. So you might see like this one is, it's a handwritten script. It's over this one, probably a dark red back paper. This is all white. So somebody would write next to it and say, well, actually, no. You're wrong. We do have to, some people aren't working hard enough, but what people need to do is grasp what Mao Zedong is saying. And we need to grasp revolution and promote production. And we need to struggle with the comrade to actually work harder based on trying to change the world and make a revolutionary society when we don't have classes. And if we had, differences in pay, that would actually exacerbate the problem that we're trying to eliminate. And then somebody else would say, well, no, you guys are both wrong. In my village, the Communist Party leaders are awful. The guy stole our mule and we can't plow our fields. So this whole communist revolution thing is bullshit. And so it was just all over society. This is like 3 stories high. And this was in big cities and small villages. And I'd see images like this. I'm an image junkie. And I also know a lot about history, particularly interested in history of revolution, particularly communist revolution. And so I wanted to make a work about the art of communist revolution. Because it's kind of like a curse word now. If I say I'm a communist, you guys, some of you are thinking, this guy's crazy. He's a communist. He's got an antenna coming out of his head. Man, how can you actually, how can we be sitting here about some unreformed communist? Well, anyway, I knew that. And I knew that the intellectual discourse around communism is particularly flat. You could say that Mao Zedong personally ate 1 million people's hearts. And most people say, yeah, that's reasonable. I read about that someplace. You don't have to be a scholar in Chinese history. You don't have to be a scholar in communism. You can just say anything about how horrible it was, how there was no freedom of the press, how people couldn't write anything. Nobody would question it. That's actually not true. These were real revolutionary societies, both in China and the Soviet Union. Soviet Union up until the mid-50s and China up until 1976. Now, as everybody knows, if anybody is even remotely honest, China is a capitalist society. Even though they have a communist party, but capitalism is what was that society. So I wanted to make work about sort of the arc of communist revolution, including the importance of ideas to revolutionary change. So I made this project called Revolutionary Archive. And so you can see how what was the, I've taken the same, what was a photograph, and I basically made it into a 3x4 foot painting. And I've highlighted these big characters. And so even if you could read Chinese, you couldn't read what most of this is. Much of the information is highlighted but obscure. But you could see that there was this massive engagement with ideas and massive debate. I could not imagine anywhere on Temple's campus or any other university that I've been to that people could write whatever they thought, glue it on the wall, and then have it stay there, not only for an hour or a day, but then somebody else would disagree and post something up next to it. That would stay not only for an hour or a day, but weeks and weeks on end. It would be a running dialogue. And so here is this massive importance of ideas to revolutionary change. And so I made this work that would highlight that. This is Peking University, big character, 1967. And again, these people are like, standing on a ladder 3 people high to put, the next thought up. And there's a whole crowd of people that are looking at this, trying to engage with, what's going on here? What is right in society? And it's sort of like, imagine a blog meets graffiti. Because with a blog, you have to sort of want to go there to kind of check out what it is, or graffiti is just sort of out in public. And this is actual intensive political radical, but out in public, and people really are trying to figure out, well, what's right? What's the best way forward? This is Red Garbage with books. And again, the particular information is obscure. I'm not so interested in what the debate was at the time, but that there was intensive dialogue, wrangling, debate, newspaper, books, communication. This is from Soviet Union. This is called Agitprop Train 1919. And this thing in the background is a train. And on the outside of the train is a painting. It's here too. And agitprop trains, the Russian Revolution, they were really centered in the cities. And most of the countryside was fairly illiterate. They knew that a revolution happened, but they didn't know a lot about it. So they developed these things where these agitation and propaganda, agitprop trains, would go across the country. And a lot of what they did was actually literacy training. They would have people and they would, read to people. They also brought some of the new technology. They would bring films, which were very new at the time. They would bring records, which were very new at the time. Everybody, most of you guys probably have a smartphone. You can rock your MP3s right in your pocket. But at the time, the Victrola was pretty modern technology. And so there's 3 levels of communication going on that I'm highlighting in this work. There's the Victrola, which all these people are kind of looking at. And I have no idea what was on that record. It's a visual work, and so you wouldn't know anyway. But I'm highlighting that there was this information communication people were engaged in. There's this, which is a film. It's a painting of a movie camera projecting either, which they probably would have had movies here. But so on the outside, there's this like really newfangled thing. I mean, it's still silent film, but nonetheless, there would have been filmed, and that would have been very new. And then the third thing, which is most of the people are looking at this guy, okay? But this guy, this guy, this guy.